Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be speaking about how you can begin to make the shift from 3D consciousness to 5D consciousness in a very conscious and intentional way. How in your day-to-day life you can catch yourself operating from an old habitual 3D consciousness space, that's very familiar, and choose to make the shift into a higher level of consciousness. Most of humanity at this point is still functioning from a 3D consciousness. But many of us who are aware of this dimensional shift and who are on a conscious spiritual path are moving more and more into the higher levels of fourth dimensional consciousness and tapping into fifth dimensional consciousness. However, we are all still functioning with 3D habits that are running us at times. We're still often operating from a 3D view on life without realizing it. We just slip back into this view at times because it's so familiar. So I'm going to be describing how consciousness generally operates in 3D, 4D, and 5D, so you can become aware of which consciousness you may be functioning at any given time, and then choose to shift to a higher one if you want. So much of this really is about awareness, becoming more and more conscious in your everyday life, waking up to what your mind is doing, staying conscious to that, and seeing what old habits you may be unconsciously following. I'll also be giving at the end some suggestions as what you can do to shift your consciousness to a higher dimension or a higher level within a dimension when you do feel stuck. Now, what I'll be describing here is generally based on my own experiences and those of others that I know and a lot of people I work with. But do keep in mind that we all have our own unique experiences and reference points. So just use what I'll be describing here as a type of map that you can, use to feel more clear about, that can assist you to create or refine your own map and your own reference points in your own ascension process. So I'm going to start with the third dimension. What is the general state of mind when you're in 3D consciousness? A lot of this is going to be obvious, but some of it not so much so. First of all, this is when your sense of identification is with what I call your ego personality self. When you're believing that you're the body, you're your thoughts, your emotions, you're the roles you play, you're the situations in your life, that whole little package of your little human self. And you're somehow forgetting that you have a higher self or that you're anything more than just an individual human being trying to function in this crazy world. And with this, you feel a sense of separation from other people, from the divine, and even from yourself at times. You feel a lot more vulnerable. Now, you may usually know better than to think that this little you is all you are. You know it's not true when you're more aware and when you're meditating. But probably in your everyday life, if you're like most people, you probably tend to go a little unconscious at times and fall back into 3D consciousness, especially when you're triggered by something that creates a reaction of fear or hurt or anger. And at those times, you're likely to forget what you know and experience during those times when you're more aware. You just pretty much feel small and alone in life. And this, of course, can be a real sign that you're in 3D consciousness. Now, if you have a belief in God in one form or another, or you call it by whatever name you call it these days, and you're experiencing 3D consciousness for a period of time, then you're likely to experience God as a separate entity, something outside of yourself that needs to be petitioned in order to help, to get the help that you need. And if you happen to get really scared about something. You may even be drawn back into the idea of how God was described in whatever religion you grew up with, where you may have experienced God as kind of a glorified father figure with human attributes, maybe. And when you're in that state of this 3D consciousness, God's love for you at this point then can feel really conditional. You may sense that he can even get angry with you or punish you if you're not good. Or if you're good and you pray and you try hard, maybe there's a belief that you can be forgiven for what you've done wrong. In other words, there's a feeling that you have to do certain things in order to deserve God's love and protection, because there's the assumption that you are inherently not okay the way you are. Now, these beliefs can be very subtle because they're generally unconscious, but they're often there, even if you think you believe, in a higher source that loves you unconditionally and that you are inherently worthy of love. This lack of self, worth is really an interesting one. I find it exists in just about everyone, consciously or unconsciously. It's just an emotion stemming from so many lifetimes living in 3D. And it's just pretty much hardwired into the human consciousness, along with shame and guilt and self-hatred that all stem from this. Which brings us to the use of self-help and healing practices that a lot of people who are on a spiritual path use. And these can all definitely be helpful for shifting into higher consciousness, except that if you're approaching them from a 3D consciousness, as I said, you might notice that in any healing work that you may be engaging in, there's generally an assumption that you're somehow broken, that you have to fix yourself in order to be okay and deserve happiness and be worthy of awakening. There is something wrong with you as you are. And you feel this because in 3D consciousness, you're identified with the ego personality self. And this seems constantly to be imperfect because it is. Now, there's a more fourth-dimensional type of approach you can take in doing self-healing practices, which I'll be describing later. But what I've been describing here is the kind of mindset of someone who's trying to heal themselves from a 3D consciousness approach, that something is wrong with you and you have to be fixed. So just watch this with yourself, with any kind of healing work you do, to just see, where is your mind about this? Is there something really wrong with you that you're trying to fix? If you're in that state, just know you're doing the healing practice from a 3D point of view. Okay, so there are a number of other emotions that stem from this same identification with the smaller self, when you're in 3D consciousness. And the biggest one really is fear. There are lots of fears, of course, but the most universal ones are fear of death, the fear of being hurt in some way, either physically or emotionally, and the fear of abandonment, the fear of aloneness. These are all really basic 3D fears. And when you're caught in fear of any kind, this creates a sensation of being unempowered and helpless, a feeling of being alone in the universe, and that you've got to look out for yourself in order to get your needs met. And even if you have loved ones, people that love you and are protective of you, on some level they can't always be there for you. You can't depend on them all the time. So a part of you still feels alone and fearful. Fear also creates a feeling and a belief in lack, that there's not enough out there, for everyone, and that you have to grab whatever you can in order to just make it in this world. And this belief then engenders such feelings as competition, survival anxiety, self-pity, and helplessness, and also a movement into blame and complaining. This all makes sense, right? All of these states of being are obviously 3D, but it can just be helpful to name them, to remind you when you're in them, a bell can go off and say, this is 3D. And it's really important to realize that all of this I've been describing stem from the identification you may be having with your little human self, your ego personality self. And this identification also causes other emotions and states of mind, such as hatred and envy, greed, resentment, judgment, oppression, control, all that stuff we're all very familiar with. But do remember that none of this is wrong or bad to be experiencing if you happen to find yourself in these states. Be careful not to go into shame or self-judgment if you're finding yourself feeling these emotions or engaging in blame or complaining. That just keeps you in 3D. Just notice it if you are. And understand that what you're in the process of doing is monumental. You are attempting to shift out of a habit that you formed probably over thousands of years living in 3D. It takes time and practice to finally make this shift out of 3D thinking and out of 3D feeling. But it's just helpful to remember that when you're in 3D consciousness, negative thoughts and emotions, all suffering in general, is pretty much predominant. It's an obvious clue. You're probably in 3D. And you can notice that when you're in it, you're seeing happiness as something that's dependent on outside circumstances of some kind, outside events, outside relationships that you often have no control over. There's no understanding that you have access to happiness that resides inside of you, that you can actually choose to be happy no matter what's happening. There's no awareness of this. And there's always a sense of waiting for happiness to happen sometime in the future, belief that something has to change first before you can be happy. So you're never quite satisfied with what's happening in the moment. There's actually no awareness of the present moment when you're in 3D consciousness. You're often caught in the past or the future. And to make things even harder, your GPS is your rational mind, which is a very limited source of wisdom. But this is where you tend to go to make decisions. You forget about following your intuition or trusting in the wisdom of your heart. Another sign that you're functioning in 3D consciousness is when you're caught in a mindset of duality and judgment. And you're operating with thoughts and beliefs of what's good and bad and right and wrong. And you tend to take polarized stances on issues, feeling that you're right and other people are wrong. And you're feeling judgment and contempt of others who have different views and beliefs. Now, this is really important to become aware of. If you find yourself caught in a polarized belief or judgment, when you're dealing in the political arena, something seems so obvious to be right and something so wrong that you've got to be careful about getting caught in an us versus them consciousness, or an us versus him consciousness, as a lot of people in the U.S. are currently doing. This is a very 3D state of mind. It truly is about unity now. It's not about right and wrong. Yet another sign of 3D consciousness is when you're experiencing an automatic reactivity to emotional triggers, such as anger or hurt or pain or irritation or despair. And it feels like you've got no ability to stop it. In general, in 3D, you're just caught in a space where there's very little self-awareness, very little self-reflection happening. And there's also usually a resistance to meeting negative emotions in a conscious way with love or compassion. You're aware of your pain body because you can get totally identified with it when it's activated. But you have no idea that this is not you, that it's something that you have, that you can relate to, or calm down, or have compassion. Feel lost in it. And you can easily recognize this state when you attempt to escape from the painful emotions through drugs, or alcohol, or sex, or work, all the different ways that the human condition has produced for us to escape into. But this is very 3D when you go there. So that, in a nutshell, is 3D consciousness. This is all very familiar to most people. You are likely waking up and shifting out of living fully from within this consciousness, but you probably do still fall back into it due to the powerful 3D habit patterns we all have. So again, if you find yourself immersed in any of these patterns I've described, there's no need to judge yourself for it. It's to be expected. Just be aware of where you are, where you feel stuck, and have compassion for yourself. This is really, really important if you're going to shift out of this kind of state. Accept whatever is happening as what is for right now. Don't try to immediately change it or resist it. If you can stop resisting what is happening in the moment, you're going to find it much easier to see what you can do to lift yourself out of it into a higher vibration. Resistance to something keeps you stuck in it. Resistance creates persistence. So that's something important to try to remember. So then, let's take a look at 4D consciousness. Let's see how it's different from 3D. I first need to explain that the dimensions have levels within them, but we don't just shift from one dimension suddenly into another. There are steps, higher and higher levels that we journey through before the dimensional shift takes place. And let's say that 4D has two basic levels. I can just call them, higher level and a lower level. And I'm going to be describing higher 4D, that level, because that's where most people who listen to these kinds of talks are functioning from. And you'll probably recognize what I'll be describing. In fact, if you've been on a spiritual path for some years, you've probably been generally functioning from this level for a while, or at least you're in and out of it in your day-to-day life. So the first thing that's different from 3D consciousness is your sense of identification. It's basically still with the ego personality self, but there's an awareness that you have a higher consciousness and that it connects you to Source. And as you move up the levels in 4D, you experience more awareness of this higher aspect of yourself, and you feel more identification with it. There's a knowing, at least intellectually, that you are not separate from the divine. You're one with it. And with this, there's also the awareness that you're not your stuff. You are not your mental and emotional issues. You're much more. You're a being who's experiencing these issues. And just this can be such a great relief, to be aware of the higher aspect of your being that you are. Also in 4D consciousness, you come into the awareness that consciousness creates reality. You begin understanding that you are creating your life. You're creating your reality. You're not just a passive participant in what happens to you. And you know the importance of positive thoughts and emotions and actions and expectations, and that you need to become conscious of your thoughts and emotions in order to create the reality you want to live in. And you can also realize that you have a choice in responding to situations that trigger you. You don't have to automatically react with a negative emotion. And because of this, you experience a greater sense of empowerment, a sense of taking charge of what happens to you. Another difference that happens in 4D consciousness is the appearance of more experiences of yourself as an observer or as the witness, in which you're watching yourself from a neutral, clear, and balanced place. And you can see more clearly the stories you tell yourself about yourself. This can really be a real key if you have this experience to just note this. This is 4D consciousness. In general, you have greater self-awareness in 4D consciousness. You're open to meeting your difficult emotions with compassion and unconditional love for yourself. And you realize it's essential to become free of your lower negative emotional reactions and judgments of yourself, that you need to learn to love all of who you are. And as a result, your love for others then becomes more unconditional as well. It just seems to happen. You tend to have more experiences of unity consciousness, knowing that everyone really is connected. And with this, you find you just want to be of service to others whenever you can. Your compassion has just really developed when you're in 4D consciousness. And in your process of healing, when you're in 4D, is this: you no longer have a belief that you're broken or that you need to be fixed. This is very 3D. In 4D, you understand that what you are is a soul. You're an eternal being. You're much bigger, much more powerful, much more complex than just a body-mind little being. And you recognize that you are already perfect, just as you are. You're simply in the process of letting go of old, inaccurate 3D beliefs that something is wrong with you. Just really take that in. This is really different. And all you're doing is releasing all the traumas and emotions that you've experienced in multiple lifetimes in 3D that you thought were a part of you, but are now clearly just a type of debris that's attached to you. And you're just learning now to let it go. And with this understanding, you can see yourself clearly as this beautiful, eternal being who's waking up to who you already are. Even if you can't feel it or know it all the time, you do have this reference point now in your healing process. Like I say, this is all very different from how you might approach your healing process within a 3D consciousness as someone who needs to change or who needs to be fixed in order to be okay or worthy. You know you are already okay and worthy. You just need to let go of old 3D ideas of who you thought you were. When you're operating in 4D consciousness, you also find that you're having an increasing number of experiences of what could be called awakened consciousness, such as periods of profound well-being, sometimes for no reason at all. They just kind of waft into your life. Or it could be a period where you're just feeling great love welling up inside of you. Or a time of deep peace. Or expansive freedom. Or maybe it's a period where you're just very aware of silence or a stillness that you've never experienced before. An experience of empty mind. There's generally an awakening in 4D into knowing yourself as a multidimensional being when you see how you have experiences of yourself on multiple levels of awareness inside you. You may even have experiences of yourself simply as pure consciousness, where there are just no boundaries. And there are generally increased synchronicities that occur in 4D consciousness. You see that things can actually work themselves out magically at times, and you begin to feel divinely guided. There's just a greater trust that you're always going to be taken care of. And although your GPS is still basically your rational mind, you just have greater reliance on your intuition now and on, what your heart is telling you. And you can also notice that intuitive psychic abilities may be coming more on board. You're experiencing telepathy. You just kind of know what people are thinking or about to say even before they say it. Or you're remembering past lives. Or you're becoming aware of your galactic heritage. Or you're experiencing sudden downloads in your mind of, wonderful wisdom or a whole body of information that seem to come out of nowhere. Or you find yourself channeling this information, saying incredible things, and you wish you were recording yourself because it is so profoundly wise, whatever it is you're saying. So these things are all coming on board when you're really operating in 4D. And as I say, all these aspects of consciousness are probably familiar to you. Although you probably still get caught in 3D habit patterns, at times, 4D consciousness is probably becoming more and more your default consciousness. But it can be challenging to stay there due to the amount of change that's likely happening in your life at this point and the speed at which it's happening. It's really natural for fear and uncertainty to arise during these times. But if you can learn how to gracefully accept what is happening in your life and to just flow with it when you're encountering changes and losses and confusion that are happening in your ascension process, it can be a whole lot smoother. As I said, it's all about awareness, at which level of consciousness you're functioning from, and making choices as to which level you wish to live in. So at this point, let me ask you something. There's a question that author and teacher Jim Self poses that I find really helpful in understanding dimensions. He asks you to imagine the most wonderful gathering you can think of your best friends and your loved ones. An occasion that would bring great joy to you. Now, this could be a whole group of people you happen to know and love, or maybe it's just 2 or 3, but they're people that you really trust and love and that you're totally comfortable with. And let's say perhaps you're having a really great dinner party with them. Just imagine this for a moment. Feel what it feels like to be with these people you love. Feel the joy. Feel the sense of comfort, the intimate trust that you have with them, and the love that's present with everyone. And let's just say, at some point you've been having so much fun, you've just lost all track of time. And you're just looking around, and you just see that everyone looks so happy. There's been such intimate sharing and a sense of connection that people have with each other, and lots of laughter, and great food. It's just been this wonderful evening. And you feel the love that's present in the room, the sense of well-being. It feels so complete. Your whole being is just humming with pleasure. And you're thinking, God, it just doesn't get any better than this. Okay, now see this as a reference point for you, all that you're feeling with this kind of scenario. And realize that these kinds of feelings indicate that you're experiencing the high fourth dimension. So this is really wonderful, right? But now you may be thinking, if this great feeling is still 4D, then what could 5D feel like? Well, it's not that this wonderful dinner party couldn't happen while you're in 5D consciousness. It certainly could. But there would probably be some differences. So let me describe 5D consciousness and see what they might be. Again, some of what I'll be describing may also sound familiar to you. You may well slip into 5D consciousness, at least for moments in your daily life. And it's just great to be aware of this. So, in 5D consciousness, your sense of identification is very different from 3D and 4D. It's actually as an eternal being, or what's been called the soul, that eternal aspect of who you are. You've essentially merged with the soul. There's no longer you and your soul. You're totally aware that you are the soul that is expressing itself in a human body. Now, this isn't just the intellectual understanding of this that a lot of people now have. It's the actual experience of it, the full knowing of it. And there's the understanding that you as the soul have extended a part of yourself down into lower dimensions to have an experience in a human form on the earth. But that human form is just one part of you, and it's at times not even the largest part of you. There's much more of you than this human form. You experience yourself as a multidimensional being, magnificent and powerful, and also simultaneously as part of the collective consciousness of all that is. There's a profound knowing of your oneness with all people, with all of existence. There's no sense of separation or duality. You know yourself to be one with all of creation. You may feel at times like you're a point of awareness in the ocean of pure consciousness. And with this, there's an expansive sense of freedom, a sense of vastness of self, of spaciousness. Your GPS in 5D consciousness is your sacred heart. It's no longer your rational mind. You find that the mind is just much too limited compared to the heart in making decisions about your life and about who you are. The heart's wisdom is much more reliable. And you have a natural, unconditional love for everyone and for yourself. There's no more judgment. And there's no working at trying to get rid of judgment like you do in 4D. It's just absent. It's not there. The love you feel for people has no attachment to it. It's a clear, a more detached type of love. There are no strings attached to it, no demands. And you're aware of how love is actually a powerful force. It's not just an emotion. It's at the core of all existence. And you're just very aware of that. And very importantly, you feel no need for approval or love or connection with others. So you have no expectations, no demands on others to meet your needs. They're all met by your own self-love and your knowing of your inherent value. There's no emotional need for anything, actually. And yet, paradoxically, it's all there for you. The love, the connection, the respect. You just don't need it anymore. It simply enhances your life to have it. Your mood in 5D consciousness is generally just clear and peaceful, happy, harmonious. There's like a quiet bliss that just keeps running through your being. And this state of being is not dependent on any outer circumstances at all, or any events or relationships. It's just there as your basic default mood. At times, you might experience a period of intense bliss, or joy, or love, or gratitude, or any of those experiences that have been called peak experiences. They do happen, but they come and go. They have more of an emotional feeling to them, and emotions come and go. But your general mood, your general state of being is just one that's quiet, peaceful, balanced, neutral, and optimistic. And the monkey mind is gone. And very importantly, what you can notice is there is a total and complete lack of suffering in 5D. There's an absence of fear, anger, depression, hurt, shame, judgment, self-doubt, loneliness. All these were left behind in the lower dimensions. They just don't come with you into 5D. Also, when you're in 5D, you can find that your senses are enhanced. And this is really wonderful. You experience the world somehow as more beautiful. Colors can actually look brighter. You may even see colors that you've never seen before. Everything looks just a little bit more alive or even lighted from within. And at times, you might even hear what's been called the music of the spheres, or maybe the eternal Om, or just the sound of silence. You also have clear access to universal mind. You realize that psychic abilities are natural to you. There's no need to speak, because you know you can communicate telepathically. You see it happening. And you're fully comfortable being totally transparent. You have nothing to hide anymore. You just are as you are. And you realize you're living constantly in the present moment, or the eternal moment. And you have a trust in the constant, effortless flow of life in each moment. The same number of events happen in your day-to-day life, but there's a timeless sensation with it. You flow from one event to the next, and there's no frustration in how things are happening. There's just the sense that rather than you moving through your life is flowing through you. Your focus in 5D consciousness is often on creating and co-creating and spending time in following what you're passionate about. You love learning and expanding your awareness. You feel a sense of wonder and excitement, even with the smallest things you discover sometimes. You also enjoy exploring and discovering new worlds, both in physical form and beyond form. And you sense that eventually, when you're in higher levels of 5D at some point, you'll probably be able to learn to time travel or visit other galactic civilizations in your physical body. You just know that this is possible for you. And in general, serving others is part of everything you do. That just goes without saying. You serve yourself and you're serving others in everything you do. And in essence, you're totally enjoying life that's filled with joy and peace and a sense of freedom and a sense of fulfillment. This is really different from your experience in 3D and 4D consciousness. There's no more niggling dissatisfaction with your life or waiting for something better to happen. Just imagine that. In 5D, there's just this buoyant optimism about life in general. Feeling of being totally alive and aware and confident that whatever is ahead for you is probably going to be just as wonderful and intriguing and delightful as life generally is for you. So this is a general map I've come up with for 3D, 4D, and 5D consciousness. We now have access to all three of these dimensions at this point, and to some degree, even beyond 5D. And as time passes, you can expect that these energies that are streaming onto the planet are going to be pushing you more and more into higher consciousness toward the fifth dimension. That's just going to be happening more and more. So it's important to be in the flow with any changes that you find happening in your life. Try not to hang on to what seems to be leaving your life, even though it may look scary to step into the unknown. Because if you don't flow with these changes that are happening, it can get rather bumpy. You really need to trust that you're being lovingly guided into a higher dimension, no matter what it is that's happening. This higher dimension is going to be a life in which you just feel a whole lot more uplifted, a lot more joy. And the more aware you become and the more trusting you are of the flow, the easier and more comfortable the ride is going to be for you. So now I'm going to offer some simple basic keys for shifting into the higher dimension. I've already given some general ones so far. But what I want to say is the main key to keep in mind is to do something that will raise your vibration. Very simply, each higher dimension or level within a dimension has a higher vibration. So if you can raise your vibration, you will automatically shift into a higher dimension or level within that dimension. And here are some ways to do this. The first thing to do, if you're feeling stuck in 3D consciousness, is to become aware of the thoughts you're thinking and the emotions you're feeling, because they're probably not positive or uplifting ones. So this is where you start. You begin shifting your thoughts and emotions. Now, positive thoughts and emotions are actually very powerful. They have a very high vibration, especially such states as love and joy and bliss. So you can see if you can consciously shift towards one of these, if it's possible. But if you can't, just start with states of being that have a moderately high vibration, like well-being, or calm, or happy, or powerful. And a very simple but powerful way to do this is by simply repeating a word like this to yourself over and over again. It's very simple to do this, and it's remarkable how you can begin feeling the energy of the word beginning to take hold of you. For instance, let's say you're feeling anxious. You can just repeat the word peaceful, for example, over and over again, just to yourself. It's very easy to remember this. When you get into an anxious state and you can't think straight, you just think peaceful. And you just say peaceful, 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 over and over again to yourself. And just see how you begin feeling by doing this. You can see how your body begins responding. It remembers the experience of peaceful because it has felt peaceful in the past. And so just repeating the word to yourself helps it to remember, and it starts shifting. And your emotions also start responding. You start becoming peaceful. And you can also use affirmations to do the same thing. The best ones are simple ones that are easy to remember when you need them. Again, say for instance you're anxious. An easy one to remember is, I am calm, relaxed, and peaceful. And as you say each word, feel the vibration of it in your body. And just say this over and over again a few times. It can actually produce a magical shift in vibration. Another thing you can do is to simply focus on gratitude. Now, this can sound corny, but it really does work. Gratitude has a very high vibration. So, if you can begin focusing on what you feel grateful for in your life and allowing the feeling of gratitude to come in, just feel it in your body, it can really start shifting so much of that negative 3D kinds of thinking and feeling. And again, you can even just repeat the word gratitude over and over again. Gratitude has a somewhat higher vibration than grateful, and you can test that in yourself. Gratitude is a higher vibration, and you can feel yourself to shift into a higher awareness, a greater openness when you start feeling this feeling of gratitude. There's actually been a scientific study on the brain that's very interesting in regard to this. They found, very scientifically, that when someone feels gratitude and then also starts feeling a sense of compassion, that this produces what they call happy brain. When someone's feeling both of these emotions, the brain actually emits chemicals that create a state of well-being and happiness. This has been proven scientifically. So this is a very simple recipe for well-being and a high vibration. Focus on compassion and then gratitude, both at the same time, and you'll create a happy brain. Yet another approach to raise your vibration can be to ask yourself questions like, how am I not loving myself in this moment? You're going to find there's probably something that you're doing that you're not loving yourself for. For instance, you can say, am I judging myself about something? Just let it come to you. Am I not allowing myself to feel a certain emotion? Am I judging it? Am I pushing it away? Or am I not loving myself enough to do something that I really want to do? Asking and answering these kinds of questions can often just get you unstuck from an irritable or a negative state of mind of any kind, because it just brings in a certain amount of compassion and respect for yourself as you allow yourself to just be as you are without judgment. You can also focus on moving into the witness or the observer, if you can do this. And this is where you move into a space that's somewhat outside of yourself, where you can just watch yourself. You watch your thoughts and your emotions. And you come to realize that you are not your thoughts or emotions. You're someone who has thoughts and emotions and who has the power to change them. And this can really loosen up your identification with your mind when you do this, which automatically raises your vibration. So there are other really effective means to raising your vibration when you feel stuck. Some simple ones. Find something that makes you laugh. Laughter is a really high vibration when you get into it. Find a really funny movie or people that make you laugh, and just laugh. It just breaks you away from any kind of 3D stuckness. You can also go out in nature. I'm sure you're aware how nature can very easily shift you into higher consciousness. Physical exercise of any kind can break energy loose from inside your body. It just relaxes the body and shifts stale energy out of your field, and this just helps to raise your vibration. You can listen to music that moves you, or look at inspirational art. Or if you happen to create music or art, you know to do that. That often can really get you unstuck out of 3D. And of course, you can try meditating more. This is a proven art of getting you into a higher consciousness. Or you can just choose to be of service to someone. Sometimes this is really what's needed, when you're really stuck and, obsessing about something that's gone on in your life and you're just feeling stuck in that self-judgment or whatever it is. Just look around to see if there's something you can do for someone else. And it'll just shift you into a whole higher consciousness. So all of these actions naturally raise your vibration and automatically shift you up into a higher level of consciousness. And then when you're there, you can consciously begin to shift even higher because your mind is freed up. It's in 4D consciousness, not 3D. And it's important to realize that the more you do these kinds of things that lift your vibration, the more a higher vibration becomes your default vibration, and the harder it is to fall back into a lower vibration. So it's really simply a matter of establishing a new habit. In general, it's important to become conscious of your ascension process, just in general. Pay attention to it. Become conscious of your thoughts and your emotions and your actions. Now, you can get help from a lot of the spiritual teachers out there that are giving meditations and activations to shift you into higher states of consciousness, and these can really work. You may experience profound transmission with them and feel a healing is happening to you, or that your vibration is rising, at least for a while when you're listening to them. And, this can be really helpful and very exciting. It gives you reference points of, where you can be in consciousness. But be clear, it's ultimately up to you to maintain that higher vibration in your own consciousness. It's up to you to find your way into the fifth dimension. You need to do your own work. This is about your individual process of evolution, and you're responsible for it. You're here because you wanted to learn how to do this. It need not be hard or painful, but it does take attention and intention and focus. So that's it for now. Hopefully this has all been helpful for you in understanding your ascension process a little more clearly, and in learning how to live more and more in the highest consciousness possible for you, and thus shift more quickly into 5D consciousness, so that this can eventually be where you live all the time. So for now, I give you my love and support on your journey home. Many blessings.